Okay, this video I'm going to show you how to solve density problems. So in class, we said that density is just the ratio of the mass and the volume of a substance. So here, D is going to represent our density. M is going to represent our mass. And V is going to represent our volume. Now, you'll know that something is the density either because a problem will tell you it's the density or because of the units. The units for density is grams per milliliter. So if you see a number followed by grams per milliliter, you should be thinking that's a density. Whereas mass, we measure in just grams, and volume, we're going to measure in milliliters. Now, sometimes you're going to be given a mass and a volume, and I'm going to ask you to calculate the density. Sometimes I might give you the density and the volume and ask you to calculate the mass. If that's the case, we can actually rearrange this equation algebraically to solve for mass. So if I multiply by volume on both sides, the volume will cancel, and I'm left with mass equals density times volume. So if you're given density and volume, if you multiply those two numbers together, you're going to get the mass. Now, if I want to solve for volume because I'm given density and mass, all I would have to do for this equation is divide by density on both sides, and then I would have V by itself. So I would get volume equals mass divided by density. So these three equations, I'll just call them equations 1, 2, and 3, are the same equation, just written in different ways. So now let's use this to look at a couple of sample problems. Okay, I'm going to move this aside, and then let's look at this first sample problem. So what this says is that we have a sample of rubbing alcohol that has a mass of 35 grams and a volume of 44.5 milliliters. It's asking what is the density of rubbing alcohol. Okay, so what I'm going to encourage you to do is label our three variables: density, mass, and volume. Well, we're told we have a mass of 35 grams, so I'll put that in here. We're told that we have a volume of 44.5 milliliters, so I'll put that right here. And then we don't know the density. So what I have to do is I have to figure out which of these three equations do I need to use. So if I don't know the density, I want to use the equation that says D equals. So I'm going to use D equals mass divided by volume. I'm going to encourage you to just rewrite whatever equation you're using. That's a good way of remembering something. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to plug in what we know. So we know M is 35, and we know V is 44.5. And so we're just going to divide 34 by 44.5. Round to 3 decimal places. So that's equal to 0.786, and the units for density are grams per milliliter, so I'm going to put that at the end. Okay, let's try another one. Okay, the second one says, ethanol has a density of 0.789 grams per milliliter. What is the volume? So when it says what is the volume, I'm going to put a question mark, of a 100 gram sample of ethanol. Okay, so first let's try to identify each of our variables. So if you recall, density is in grams per milliliter, and they give us the density 0.789 grams per milliliter. Okay? Mass is measured in grams, and they give us that we have a 100 gram sample. So 100 grams is going to be our mass, and the volume is what we need to figure out here. So because we don't know the volume, I have to choose which equation I'm going to use. And I'm going to go with the one that says V equals, because then we're solving for the volume. So I'm going to write the equation, V equals mass divided by density, and then I'm going to plug in what we know. So I know that the mass is 100. I know that the density is 0.789. And so when I do that, 100 divided by 0.789 is 126.7 grams, or sorry, milliliters, 126.7. So a couple of things. Notice how I'm not using every decimal here, I'm rounding. So you don't need to write all of these decimals. And then the second thing is, make sure you include your units. Okay, last one. Here we have vegetable oil has a density of 0.91 grams per milliliter. What is the mass? So I'll put a question mark, of a 30 milliliter sample of vegetable oil. So let's identify all three variables. It tells us density is 0.91. It asks what is the mass. So we can put a question mark in for mass. And then remember, the units for volume are milliliters, so a 30 milliliter sample. So for this problem, I need to figure out the mass. And so if we go back to all of our equations, I'm going to choose the one that says M equals. So M equals D times V. So let's write that here. We'll plug in what we have. So our density is 0.91, and our volume is 30. So I'm going to multiply 0.91 times 30 right here. $27.3. Because I'm doing mass, I know that's going to be grams. So again, these are the three versions of that equation that are going to be most useful. Whichever variable is missing, whether it's D, M, or V, will dictate which of these equations you should choose. None of them will be wrong, but when you're missing, for example, density, then this first equation is the easiest to use.